Years later, and the families of the more than 140 people who died in the Life Esidimeni tragedy still do not know what led to and who is ultimately liable for the deaths of their loved ones. Former Managing Director at Life Esidimeni, Manqoba Mchunu, is back on the witness stand in the inquest where he's being cross-examined. Mchunu previously denied that the patients were moved from the facility without medical records. He also denied that patients were ill when they arrived at the NGOs. eNCA reporter Manqoba Mchunu following the proceedings and is joining us now on day 3 of the inquest with the latest. Manqoba, good afternoon. We've heard that from some of the NGOs disputing the claims that are being made by Life Esidimeni that patients were in a good condition when they left the facility. What came out from them?
Well, certainly, Braden, one of the contentions that has been raised by some of the NGOs is the fact that some of these patients, when they arrived at these facilities, they did not have their medical records. You recall also that yesterday we heard from the lawyers representing the former mental health director in Gauteng, Dr. Manqoba, saying that some of the patients, in fact, were in a bad state and that they were malnourished, as well as, some of them were frail when they went to some of these NGOs. But of course, the NGOs are saying that this is not true. In fact, they're saying that what complicated matters is the fact that some of these patients did not have their medical records when they arrived at this particular facilities. They're saying that Life Esidimeni failed to even provide what is known as the summaries or discharge summaries for some of these patients, which will essentially but then list the complications or list the diseases that these particular patients were facing at the time, and also the medication that will be needed for these patients to be treated. They're saying that there were no medication as well that was offered to them when these patients came to them. And of course, they say this actually complicated and made matters worse for some of these NGOs in terms of treating these patients, which ultimately led to also the demise of some of these patients. But of course, Life Esidimeni disputing this, the former managing editor or the former managing boss of Life Esidimeni saying that there is no truth in these allegations. In fact, when these patients were discharged, there were those medical records that were given to these institutions. So he's basically poured cold water to some of the claims that have been made. But take a listen to that interaction.
The instruction that I received from clients is that the mental care users that were received by them had no recent periodicals. What's your comment?
My comment would be similar as previously. I cannot account for what happened after documents were handed over to the Department of Health officials. Between leaving Life Esidimeni and reaching the destination NGO, that was totally out of my hands.
But to that question, is that the instruction that I received from clients is that some of the mental care users arrived with only Form 3, which is the discharged form, and that form had only brief notes on them. What's your comment?
Come again? If before the witness responds, I take it that the witness knows who was responsible for Tsepong and Takalani. Mosego. Yes, Mosego. Yes, but
yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, Manqoba, I understand that one of the lawyers representing social worker Daphne Ndlovu in this inquest is also disputing this matter that's just been mentioned here. What did this lawyer have to say?
Well, but then the lawyer is saying that his client, Daphne Ndlovu, will actually come before this particular inquest to testify to the effect that over 60% of those patients that came from Life Esidimeni did not have any of their medical records. And of course, this further complicated the treatment of these patients and led to their demise. So she's basically saying that, what Life Esidimeni is claiming in terms of those medical records is not true, but Of course, Life Esidimeni, on the other hand, saying that they are sure that these medical records were given to these particular facilities and that they're really not responsible for anything that happened after they handed these documents over to the Department of Health. But take a listen to what the lawyer had to say.
That it is my client's testimony that some of the patients did not receive their medical records. And as a result, these people died because they did not have medication, they did not have medical records from Life Esidimeni.
I have indicated earlier on that Life Esidimeni put in controls to ensure that any mental health care user that leaves the Esidimeni facility has got their documentation, has got their medication, and that was handed over to the Department of Health officials. And I repeat, I do not have any control of what happened in transit after those patients were handed, then their medication and documents were handed over to the Department of Health officials. From there to the receiving of facility, I had absolutely zero control.